A 9 on your side I-Team investigation prompted Mayor John Cranley to call for an audit into how a local nonprofit spends your tax dollars.
The Center for Closing the Health Gap received $1 million in city funds this year, and now it's asking for another $1 million next year. I-Team reporter Hillary Lake has been digging into this story for weeks. Hillary, what'd you find out?
Well, the small charity is supposed to be using tax dollars to promote better health and provide fresh food in underserved neighborhoods. But the I-Team found much of its money is spent on its employees, including a CEO who receives nearly $250,000 a year, prompting one expert to say the health gap has failed in its mission.
A trip to the grocery store is merely a mirage in this food desert. People who call Walnut Hills home now must rely on other options to buy healthy food.
How important is it that he stocks fruits and vegetables for you?
Well, it's really important because if he's got fruits and vegetables, that means you will come and he'll come and, you know.
Sean Reese now shops for healthy food a few blocks away from the closed Kroger at Johnny's Market. Signs advertising "Eat Fresh, Feel Good" indicate this is a healthy corner store, one of the dozen programs through the Center for Closing the Health Gap to promote healthy choices in underserved communities.
Do you go back and check in with the store owners? Do you go back and visit the stores? How does that work?
Yes, we actually go in bi-weekly. We have outreach workers that go into those stores.
Renee Mahaffey-Harris, the Health Gap's executive director, says the group is exceeding the city's minimum performance goal of 11 healthy corner stores.
We have about 13 in 8 communities.
The group's $1 million grant, in part, depends on meeting that minimum goal of 11 stores. The I-Team visited 10 of those locations and found relatively empty food bins. In some cases, store managers told us they either didn't know about the program or they were no longer part of it. Today, in an email to the I-Team, the Health Gap admitted only 4 stores are participating, falling far below the organization's performance goal for funding.
What we provide is knowledge, so we may train them on how to handle the produce, how to remove that rotten fruit so that it doesn't spoil the whole batch. So that's what we're training. That's that partnership. It is a partnership.
Harris tells the I-Team that partnership also carries over into the Health Gap's other work, training community members to advocate for healthy choices among neighbors.
We don't deliver programs. We are training people how to fish.
There are many groups, including our own health department, that provides direct services in many cases to the minority population. Could those dollars be better spent?
City Councilman Kevin Flynn is also alarmed that the Health Gap spends $737,500 on salaries for 11 employees. They also pay former Cincinnati Mayor Dwight Tillery $232,000 for his role as CEO. The I-Team asked nonprofit expert David Van Slyke, a professor at Syracuse University, to review documents about the Health Gap spending.
I was surprised to see the salary of the executive director and the salary of the CEO.
And about those corner stores?
That fundamentally is not meeting that goal that the nonprofit is saying that it's going to deliver on.
We have a fiduciary obligation to make sure that every dollar is spent in a way that brings the biggest bang for that buck.
Now, this afternoon, Dwight Tillery, the Health Gap's founder and CEO, responded to our investigation on the organization's Facebook page. Here's part of what he had to say.
This is really an attack on black people by those who are in positions of power to continue to beat us down. But we're not going down.
And Tillery has also called a press conference for Monday. We'll be there and bring you the latest. The Health Gap is also asking Hamilton County for a grant for the first time. It wants $2.5 million to expand its work. If you go to WCPO.com right now, you can read more about some of the other programs this organization spends your tax dollars on.
The 9 on your side I-Team is digging more into how a local nonprofit spends your tax dollars.
Mayor Cranley ordered an audit into the Center for Closing the Health Gap because of findings of the I-Team
brought to you yesterday. I-Team reporter Hillary Lake has spent weeks working on this. Hillary, what spurred our investigation in the first place?
Well, the Center for Closing the Health Gap currently gets more money from the city than any other nonprofit except the United Way. The Health Gap also initially asked the city for $5 million for next year, quadrupling its current grant amount. But now the nonprofit says it's only going to ask for $1 million.
Whether it's working with corner stores to provide fresh food options or training community members to teach others how to advocate for healthy choices, the Center for Closing the Health Gap says its mission is to help fix a very real problem in Cincinnati: racial disparities in quality health care.
We have built awareness, and we are building a path towards improvement in the knowledge and addressing the factors.
But the I-Team's investigation reveals the group has spent some of its $1 million grant money from the city on $175 an hour executive coaching sessions for the group's executive director, Renee Mahaffey-Harris, consulting invoices to the city that don't describe actual work. And it hasn't met its goal of providing access to healthy foods in enough locations through its corner store program.
Your reporting has brought to light some very disturbing facts about the way the city money has been spent.
Other city records obtained by the I-Team show the group paid more than a dozen people as much as $12 an hour to attend trainings on making healthy choices.
The reality is the economic injustice or inequality that exists in our city is huge. And so, if, a $12 stipend to commit 10 hours a week is well worth the time and investment that's going to be returned on that.
Harris tells the I-Team the grassroots work is primarily focused in locations like Mount Auburn and Walnut Hills.
We don't deliver programs. We are training people how to fish. We're teaching them how to be the solution to their health.
The I-Team initially took its findings to Mayor John Cranley a couple of weeks ago. He ordered an investigation and audit into the health gap even before WCPO first published this story.
If they can't provide outcomes, then we need a better use of city tax resources to address the real issue.
This afternoon, the Health Gap tweeted the press conference it had called for Monday is canceled until further notice. Coming up tonight at 6, I'll explain what the audit entails and how long it will take, and hear from Mayor Cranley about the city's responsibility in all of this.
Disturbing. That's what Cincinnati Mayor John Cranley calls some of the findings of our I-Team's investigation.
Tonight, he shares why he called for an investigation into how a local nonprofit spends your tax dollars. I-Team reporter Hillary Lake is here to explain what he sees as a potential problem. Hillary.
One of the mayor's biggest concerns is if the Center for Closing the Health Gap is using tax dollars to fund a political agenda.
I'm Mayor John Cranley, and I believe that every citizen deserves the best chance to be healthy.
The mayor doesn't dispute there's a racial disparity when it comes to quality access for health care in Cincinnati. That's why he supported the mission of a local nonprofit.
The Center for Closing the Health Gap is working hard to improve the well-being of our entire community.
But the I-Team discovered the city refused to pay some of the invoices for the health gap last month because the city determined those expenses to be outside the scope of the group's work. A letter from the city to the group says the invoices billed the city for Black Agenda work. The city refused to pay for it because the Black Agenda is a local political group.
We have to be vigilant to make sure that city tax dollars are not being used for political purposes.
After 7 years of funding from the city, that was the first time that we had experienced anything like that.
The Health Gap's CEO, former Cincinnati Mayor Dwight Tillery, is also a board member of the Black Agenda. Renee Mahaffey-Harris is the Health Gap's executive director.
We are one of many organizations that are part of the Black Agenda.
The I-Team discovered the Health Gap also submitted an invoice to the city for websites for the Black Agenda. The city did pay for those, even though Harris insisted it's not using taxpayers' money for political purposes.
We are not using any funds from the city to pay for the Black Agenda activity.
Can you explain how that happened?
Well, listen, your reporting has brought to light some very disturbing facts about the way the city money has been spent.
Cranley tells the I-Team the city's investigation into the health gap will focus on spending millions of dollars of taxpayer money.
Obviously, the contract is for reducing health disparities. It's not for political agenda issues. So clearly that's, if that's true, that's clearly wrong, and it needs to be reimbursed to the taxpayers.
Cranley wonders if the $1 million the health gap wants for next year should go elsewhere.
We have a duty, in my opinion, to measure how they're doing, and if they're not measuring up to, say, our health department, we should give the money to the health department. Vice versa, if they're doing better than our health department, we should give them more money.
The mayor has vowed for a quick turn on the investigation. He also tells me he thinks the city should review how it tracks the performance of nonprofits that receive city grants. For the next city budget, a new ordinance will require city council to review grant applications in a more in-depth way before they approve the grants.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. A local nonprofit could have to repay the city of Cincinnati as much as $20,000 in taxpayer funds because of the results of an audit released today.
That's right. City Manager Harry Black ordered the audit 2 months ago after the 9 on Your Side I-Team discovered issues with how the Center for Closing the Health Gap bills the city. Investigative reporter Hillary Lake has combed through this report. Hillary, what else stands out to you?
Well, guys, in the 78-page report, the city shares responsibility with the health gap for the audit's findings. That report also confirms the findings of our I-Team investigation.
From healthy corner stores to access to quality health care, the Center for Closing the Health Gap's mission is to serve some of Cincinnati's poorest neighborhoods. A city audit released Thursday uncovers the nonprofit, run by former Mayor Dwight Tillery, was billing the city for questionable expenses.
What this audit tells me is that the health gap is guilty of a lack of internal administrative oversight and quality control as it relates to their invoicing process.
City Manager Harry Black started the audit in March. Mayor John Cranley ordered it after a 9 on Your Side I-Team investigation revealed the health gap had billed the city for work done by the Black Agenda, a political group. It also wasn't operating the number of healthy corner stores required by its contract with the city.
In terms of that particular element of the contract, they were lacking. However, the way that you deal with that is when we redo the contracts.
City auditors went through the health gap's city funding for the past 5 years, totaling nearly $3 million. Some of the other findings include subcontractors the city paid for health gap work might have also simultaneously worked for the health gap, which could be red flags for the IRS, and questions about how many people the group is actually reaching with its block-by-block intervention program. The health gap refused to give auditors more information about that. But Black says auditors also found the city contract, which the health gap wrote but the city approved, is also a problem because it's too vague to enforce in some areas.
The city bears tremendous responsibility in this, and that's outlined in the audit as well. But again, that's still no excuse for not doing complete or accurate work.
Black's office will monitor the health gap's contract instead of the health department for the foreseeable future, and he's recommending the city fully funds the group's request for $750,000 in next year's budget. And the audit also impacts other nonprofits that get city funding. All of them will now face stricter oversight from the city going forward. We also reached out to the health gap today, and we are waiting for a response.